Do I have to use the mic or? Okay, so yeah. Okay. Okay, I will start my speech and okay, to start this debate, I would like to make a couple of setup in accordance to this debate. Okay, so first off, what does investing look like? So investing looks like, how the government of a country funding artists who aim to make, who aim to make more arts and more cultures in much a more modern media, like for example, movies or even music or even um, dances or even all that stuff. And so by having this investment, it means there's going to be more funding towards these creative artists or even creative directors in order to make these much more brand new movies or even art or even games and so on. And so when artists they start making a much more modernized type of media that includes traditional cultural folklore values, the modern people are actually going to be interested in this new, much more modernized form. Like for example, maybe we take a look at, like that catch a character from Mobile Legends game, or maybe even when we watch the opening ceremony that you see by, watching a traditional dances performance, that it's actually going to be a very beneficial for the for artists and for also for countries who would like to preserve their folkloric and traditional values or even traditional cultures. Because why? Because it's gonna be, it's gonna be integrated within the modernized value. Okay, so moving on to what is our mechanism and our urgency here. And so in our current status quo, traditional and folkloric values, folklore cultures is slowly disappearing. Nobody really has an incentive to look for these folklores if they don't have the incentive to look for more information regarding this folklore stories and so on. And so preserving the folklore and oral culture is very important. And so this is an urgency that needs to be brought up onto this debate. Because if modern people nowadays, they don't really care about the culture, about what's going to happen, they don't care about the folklore cultures, what their roots are, it's going to be really dangerous in the long run because eventually these folklore cultures are going to be disappearing in the long run. And so, yeah, and it's currently already rapidly disappearing. And so it's going to be, modern people are going to tend to be more care about the existing modern values and it's not what we want. And so at the end of the day, culture is rapidly disappearing and so government needs to take action into preserving these folklore values. And so what is our goal here? So our main goal here is our main goal here is for preservation. What does preservation mean? So it means to take this folklore values and to translate it into modern audiences. And how do we do that? I will be further in my argument. So first of all, my principal argument it's going to be in two layers. So first off, why preserving folklore only comes from investment, by active investment. Okay, so two layers of this. So one is preservation of value. So what is our trade-off here? So folkloric or original values is going to change anyway, and why we're saying that is it's not gonna disappear completely, but eventually it's going to take a different form. Maybe it's not the original type of folklore media, but it have to be translated and to take a modern form of it. So yeah, we tell you why it's actually okay as long as the culture still exists by within the mind of these medias like arts and movies, and so it can integrate within the modern audiences. And so what actually important is that the modern audience they're still gonna they still take in mind and to actually they still at least know about this folklore cultures, what their roots are. And so by integrating those modern media, people are they're gonna start discourse about it, and they're actually gonna be informative about everything about these folkloric values. And so why we have to take this investment really seriously and very actively, because investment empowers the artists. Because when artists they cannot get any funding for to make their arts, maybe they don't have enough money, or maybe they don't even have the funding for their art to reach their goals in order to reach a level.
When these traditional folks see that their piece of folklore folklore is modernized, they won't see it as something that they can be proud of. They will feel alienated from that.
Okay, in response to that, I feel like there's not going to be any alien form of it because if anything, when you actually translate something that is folkloric cultures, like for example, maybe if you take, maybe modern Western blockbuster media, like maybe movies, which they adapted traditional stories, for example, people are going to actually be like, oh, maybe this is something new that I've never heard of. Maybe, modern people who actually, at first they don't know what that story is, maybe they can finally, start a Discord, maybe they will start talking about it more. And so, yeah, what's the most important thing is that, people are still going to care, at least care to some extent about these, folklore media and stuff, and so, yeah. And so, yeah, moving on to my, my practical argument. So how people are actually going to, care about these folklore values by translating it into the modern type of media. And so people are going to actually care when it comes to, when these cultures become empowered and palatable. So yeah, with that in mind, people are, the modern people, they're actually going to start paying attention to it more. Maybe, when the modern audiences, they tend to be more caring about, oh, maybe for example, watching a Hollywood movie or even maybe listening to music or even watching concerts or even, watching a dance performance. They're actually going to start paying attention to that when they actually listen to what they like. And so when you do that, modernizing of these folklore values is actually going to attract more audiences. So there's going to be discourse. People are going to start talking about it. People are going to they're going to be very informative regarding this folklore cultures. And so again, I'll bring up an example. So if Western blockbuster movies, they adapt traditional folklore cultures into the movies because again, it's one way for people to actually going to be interested in it. Like take for example, maybe even Disney movies who's been making animated movies, taking risks from traditional culture from various countries. So with that in mind, we can actually start to, we see people there are going to start talking about, oh, maybe these, certain groups of people who don't know that this certain culture exists, maybe they're going to start to become more informative about it. They know about it now. And so one way to translate folklore cultures is to adapt to what the modern audiences like to do, for example, concerts and watching movies and so on. And so it's relating back to our main goal, which is preservation of these, folklore cultures. And so yeah, one way to observe folklore is to integrate within the modern audience. And so that is all for me.
Right, thank you, Prime Minister, for the speech. Right, I have an announcement and a message. So apparently you do have to use the mic. Right, so
You can't
I'm
hear
sorry.
us?
No.
You can't hear us if you don't use it.
No, I can hear you, but the people in the live stream. That's apparently the best person. Right, proceeding, I would like to welcome the leader of opposition to start your speech.
Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, we believe that in the status quo, a lot of people really enjoying the modernized thing songs and a lot of things that really existing in the current things that that sometimes combining in something traditional, right? Like they're singing song, however, they're using traditional clothes or etc. However, the like songs, clothes, etc. However, this modernized actually can impacting or bring more harms to the diversity or the value itself to the culture. For example, Indonesia, because most of the actors that try to combine of these two things, because these two different ways of different arts that also have a different philosophy or background of creating the song itself, sometimes they are misused or making the new perspective or what is the traditional thing in the modern ways that actually losing the value of the traditionals of the folklore itself. Therefore, we need to be careful as the government Therefore, we need to be careful on it because these two actors, different ways of art to gain interest or engagement of people, but actually losing the value itself. But therefore, I want to rebuttal like it's okay to have still the culture exist. However, if the culture exists, it's only tiny things, but it's existed, but the value cannot be understood by the generations. It's still gonna be lost anyway. And the second, the artist cannot have any funding like incentive. Like you said that can have any funding and incentive. However, if there is a combine between modernization and traditional, the most gut intention from the society is the one who can modernize the traditional. However, we need to understand the actors itself. For example, the traditional one, they are expertise in making the traditional because they know the background, they know why they're making the song, because they have the missions that this culture value need to be heritage to the generations itself. And then this traditional, if the actors that create the modern something, sometimes most of them actually the bad thing is it's want to get the interest or engagement from the society. Therefore, we need to be careful in modernizing something that actually have essential things to our nations or even to our value as a nations, and they attract more to the folklore culture. We need to be careful also in this. This culture can be introducing a lot in some occasions. We need to still focus on the folklore or the traditional thing, but introducing in such in a current situation, for example, G7, like a lot of our places that like a lot of new occasions, that international occasions, or even they are introducing this traditional way, but still not combining in any modern ways, but still can have attentions to the society itself, right? Therefore, I'm gonna get back to my arguments. The actors, we need to find under the actress, the artists, people who creates the arts, like the writers and the artworks. If you're talking about game, it's another way different because it's something that really modern. For example, Mobile Legends is something like a game. It's something that it's hard for us to combine that folklore things to maybe this story. However, we should push our generations to create something that not always not focusing on the game, because they're not only focusing on the game, not to the folklore itself. We need to give a place or form that came to the government or came to us to actively, significantly investing to the generation. You need to know, you need to understand this value and why we should heritage it. Therefore, they can understand and they cannot be influenced by other, because they all understand why we should have this culture and this art, and not all just only because this is interesting in the game or interesting and looking from the stage, right? We want to them have the understanding, right? And the next, people base the actors always based on the passion, expertise, and know the knowledge, even the experience that came from their environment. They know their music. First, traditional artists, they understand what it's not only about the content of the song. They want to share something, but also want to share the arts of what is the arts of the background that should be known by the generations. The folklore intention are to inherit the certain culture values to generations. For example, if the comparative to the modern artists, they create song based on the experience. For example, Taylor Swift, it's from the love. She is not expertise in some traditional song, right? She create because of the experience. Therefore, they want to have attentions and the songs that can be enjoyed to the general society. Therefore, they want to have a lot more engagement. They don't get the love from the certain people that in certain people. For example, Indonesia, you're gonna use batik, but somehow some can be used for some artists that actually not understanding the culture itself, right? In our stand, we want the traditional artwork, this traditional artwork or this folklore thing not losing their identities, and this moderns the folklore, this modernized folklore are somehow not respecting the ancestor value that already existed. The society, we need to understand who is more really interesting in the artworks, the young generation. They still not understand any values, even though you are performing them. They only know that's good. I already explained it, and they are really vulnerable in understanding something, or sometimes misimprinted a message that are created by certain famous people, right? Therefore, we need to have their influence from the right sources. For example, their expertise. Now we need to understand a lot of people, like traditional way, they're losing their job because they don't find a way of a form that can give them actually really introducing them of what really to this generation, because the generations are more pushing to the modern ways. Therefore, you should be careful at that. In preserving, we cannot lose any components of value itself. So rather than significantly investing to the modernize, the folklore is better to invest and more focus on the folklore itself to be developed and present in fully, because the modern artist will get some because if we see through this like modernized artists or singer, they also gonna have intention, even though we not significantly like pushing them, significantly investing them, they all still get invest. But this kind of traditional artists or actors, they are not getting there. Therefore, is the thing that we should more concern as the oppositions, right? In a way. We need to help this kind of thing, because sometimes most of the artists misuse, for example, they use batik or they use our cultural clothes, but in not appropriate way, sometimes very short. It's not the same value as the thing that already heritage by ancestor. Therefore, we probably oppose. Thank you.
Check, check. All right. Ideally taking a POI from closing for cross-bench engagement, but if not, gladly taking one from opening as well. In between clashes, probably around minute 4 or 5. Starting. I think the biggest problem with opening opposition's case is very simple. They have zero likelihood and eventually fall to the problem of urgency that we already clearly set up. We already tell you that cultures are disappearing in status quo. We already tell you the problem is that cultural erasure happens left, right, and center to an extent where nobody is eventually caring about these cultures. No one cares to represent it accurately enough. So even the people that care so much about the culture, the elders, the people that are actually, representative of these cultural cultures or folklores, eventually recognize that they have little to no standing in the modern society. This is why Will's point becomes so important. I don't think this has been properly engaged. This is a huge burden that both upbenches need to engage in if they want to take this over OG. So 2 clashes to prove why OG takes this debate. 1, which side eventually better preserves the values? And 2nd, how this creates better accessibility to the cultures towards the modern audience. I'm going to frame why this becomes the most important benefit of this debate. But firstly, in principle, best preservation of values. I think it's inherently important and sort of a weird concern coming from opposition about why you would eventually care to, give a correct accurate representation of the culture when in reality you know that the culture is disappearing. So the delta is simple. It's not whether or not you're actually going to create a correct culture. It's actually whether or not the culture is going to have representation in and of itself, right? So at the end of the day, the option is simple. 1, you create modern representation insofar as you create, modernization of art, or simple, the art disappears in 10, 20 years time. I don't think we want to take that trade-off. We've already made that clear. CO's POI to my first speaker eventually does go towards that same line of logic that opening opposition posit, right? They want to tell us that people that preserve the culture directly will eventually be upset. Okay, let's talk about the rational calculus. This likely analysis will break the deadlock in both upbenches, right? I think 2 responses. 1, they're already at a position where they know their culture is disappearing. It means that they already have their basic rational calculus to know that there needs to be action taken, because they know that only several hundred people speak their language. They know that only several regions in the entire world actually have the proper equipment to represent their culture. They know that no one really understands that culture, right? So the only way to actually get that message across to the modern audience is by modernization, right? But secondly, even if they become upset, most likely there is still a net benefit of representation insofar as their culture is going to be preserved, right? So because exactly they don't want their culture to disappear, they will also take the trade-off to the extent where they will, gladly take, perhaps not 100% accurate representation, so long as modern audiences know about their culture. Modern audience have that contact. And I think this becomes the most important benefit of the debate, because eventually you give them the platform to be listened to in the first place, right? So if the problem is that they want to, so if opening opposition's counterfactual is that you want these people to eventually, come out and tell the people about the culture, tell modern audience about their culture, tell the story, etc. No one listens to them because no one knows who they are, right? So exactly, what OJ does is we give them a platform to be listened to. This is the likelihood that opening opposition lack. The net benefit is there. Let's talk about opening opposition directly though. If you tell us that you're going to lose the values, we tell you that artists, and that artists probably don't understand the values, then this can simply, I think this point can simply be neutralized by saying that modern audiences care about accurate representation. Insofar as if, for example, this culture is represented, then the original artist or the original the elders of that culture come out to the internet and tell us that, I'm someone that this culture tries to represent. This representation is not 100% accurate. The filmmakers, the audience, the producers will eventually be cancelled as well, or called out. So there is an active incentive to also create accurate representation, right? Why? Because when the government is the one that significantly invests in these artworks, then it's most likely because the government has that vested interest to maintain that folklore, to maintain the cultural, right? So eventually, we think that this is going to preserve the values better. So exactly, when Will tells you that we take the trade-off of perhaps not 100% accurate culture, I think it's still eventually the better, it's a much better benefit than losing the culture altogether, right? Because exactly, if we're talking this house would, this is a state interest motion, right? The state has an interest to maintain the culture. So realistically, the state doesn't want their folklore to disappear. They care about the traditional values of their people. They care about their people. So it's more likely that they're going to properly preserve it. Clash 1 goes to OG. Before that, any POIs? Closing, opening, moving on. Second clash about how this is going to better create accessibility, right? Will has already told you how more funding going to the artworks eventually is going to help the artists as well, right? Why? This is important because artists probably don't have enough funding or don't have enough voice or don't have the accurate platform to properly voice out their concerns, to voice out, to tell their story, right? So eventually what these artists already understand is that they need that platform, but they currently don't have it. So exactly, when the government then comes in and significantly invests in that, puts a lot of money in it, empowers the artists, exactly like PM has already told you, what this does is it addresses the root cause of the problem, right? Modern audiences already have a mindset that folklore is less attractive prospect than, exactly. When you think about the word folklore, you think about Taylor Swift, not the actual folklore. You don't think about the culture, right? So exactly, modern audiences prefer to actually look at modern forms of art, modern concerts, modern dances, etc. So it's really, really important to actually make it more palatable to that audience, exactly, so that the modern audience actually digests it. What this looks like is probably Javanese gamelan being incorporated with dubstep, like that one song that eventually went trending on TikTok. Exactly, when these kinds of forms of art will exist, these kinds of art will eventually become trending all over the world, all over social media. This is when you give these artists that platform. Latih creating that dubstep gamelan eventually put gamelan onto the world map, right? Now people start looking, wow, this is a very unique form of music. So exactly, we want to continue to do that, right? This addresses the problem insofar as modern audiences don't have enough contact with that kind of art. So exactly, it's important to actually have that much investment. It leads to younger audience directly, actively looking at these forms of folklore, right? This applies to the general society because this directly tackles what kind of forms of art they want to look at. If these modern audiences want to go to a concert, want to look at dubstep, want to listen to that kind of music, making it more palatable, making it directly towards what they like, means that the modern audiences will actually care to look for the art in the first place. This is exactly when the discourse is going to happen. This is when people start talking about it, start talking about what kind of art is going to be represented. So exactly, not only does Prime Minister's benefit fly, I don't think enough engagement has been given from opposition bench, but I think this already directly preempts any and all extensions coming from opening. Also, if CG wants to try to run with an extension of general audience, it's derivative to OG. We take this debate. Second clash goes to us. Very, very proud to propose.
Wait a minute. Okay, dear educator, we do not agree the government is significantly invest in artworks that aim to modernize folklores because like what my first speaker already said, it is crossing the main value of the folklore itself, the educator. Why? Because when we combining traditional with the modern itself, firstly, what we should concern about, we do not see, it is because the OG do not give a clear mechanism that should come from them. They, like if they, the musician, want to adapt in specific culture from certain ethnics, means you firstly need to take permission from the ketua adat or someone that is holding the rights in ethnic to give explanation or education background about the main value of the culture that should not be erased, which the musician should protect, right? So they don't explain about this first, so we don't think they would come after us. But second, let's say if they did this mechanism at the very first place, but it will be difficult for all stakeholders, the educator. First, the musician itself. It's difficult also for them to get permission to the leader of the ethnic without specific approach, and it's also consuming many time to adapt with the culture first. Because yeah, we need to know that if the musician want to adapt with this culture, they are the one who should firstly adapt with the culture itself, right? So rather than if they already adapt with the culture itself, rather than they can compose the arts and combining with the traditional and the modern itself. So it's consuming the time and it's not efficient, and it is also it is not appropriate with the keyword in the motion itself. That is, we will significantly invest on this type of adaptation. And the second, it's also difficult for the traditional or cultural society itself to accept this change, the educator. Our society is not mature enough and ready to this significant change. Maybe it will work for this maybe it will work for many time for them to accept, but they need long time to truly really meaning this modernization itself. So we do not think the significantly time is very appropriate for our society and both for the musician itself. And the second, many people on both sides, the educator, will unrecognized, and our worst case is left behind because okay, we want you to take to our POV. So if modern musician wants to adapt folklore, they will work together with someone from organization that preserve this cultural folklore, like the maybe Ormawa or etc. But only the good one or the most expert one will get hired, right? So it's also happened under the musician groups. Only certain people that interest to do such this adaptation. Thus, only several people from both sides that can do the collaboration to actually work to make this gonna happen and achieve successfully. And so how about the other people that got left behind? Maybe they still just keep going on work to their own files, but they will get less attention from society because yeah, there is a group of people that can combine this. But isn't it not fair under government as the one who should give equally opportunity for all a group of people from all both musician and traditional itself? So come to our mechanism. So our mechanism is by giving investment significantly for the traditional itself. Like we all both agree from our government and opposition. We want to protect these traditional values. Like, but they say we can combine this. But the educator, it is crossing the branch because it is the traditional and the modern modernization have the crossing values. Like what the opening government is said before. They say. Traditional is less attractive. That's why less attractive. That's why under our side we want to improve. We want to invest more on traditional folklore itself to be more attractive by their own self, by their own way, not by combining two values that are contrasting each other. We want to make our culture become rich and more attractive under our side and go beyond to the traditional, to the modern itself by their ourselves, by their own way, not by moderning themselves like the educator. So we don't want to contrasting these two values. That is not gonna be work if we combine that. And also that is what we want. They also the traditional stakeholder, folklore stakeholder is less attention from society because they have no such accessibilities. There are no accessibilities comes from modern people to see what traditional values right. So that is what our main concern about it under our side, because we want to invest to give access, not only just to give opportunity for the traditional to actually work on their to to keep improving by themselves, but also we want to give accessibilities. We can give exposure, like we will posting them, giving them special event like traditional national events, to give them promotion, to give them exposure.
Point, OG.
No, thank you. To give them exposure, to give them a promotion, so the modern people can give the accessibilities to see what is the values of the traditional folklore that they want to get recognized by the society, right? So that's what I think that is keep answering what the opening government already kept answering on their speech, like we don't have accessibilities, we are less attractive. That's why it is our main key. No, that is our main key, that we want to give more investment on the traditional folklore to keep attractive by themselves and keep go beyond by themselves, to keep more recognized by the society, by giving them special events, by giving them special exposure, posting them on social media, and giving them certain place to give them promotion. Yes.
Okay. Since you're saying about you will give them back money your way, so what is exactly the traditional way to use for the traditional folklore accepted since it's already been refused by today's generation, other than the modernization?
It's not. Can you see, please, again? Can you replay it? No, it's not refused by our generation. That's why we want to understand our generation itself first. That is, we want to give opportunity, the place for the traditional to recognized by our society, not combining with the modern and erasing the main values of the traditional itself first. So we want to also break the mind of our generation, that is the traditional is not attractive and etc. But we want to make the power come from the traditional itself, comes from the folklore itself, to be recognized from the society itself. No, if you say like so, it means you agree with what our generation behavior, that they still in the future they do not attract with traditional if we do not combine this with the modern. So we want to still keep our position as a traditional, to keep access in this current society. Thank you. We were proudly oppose this motion.
Thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for the speech. Let us proceed to the second half of the debate. I would like to welcome the member of the government to start their debate here.
Check. Panels, before begin to my extension, there are several things to rebut from the opposition side of the House. Firstly, they come and say that that it will create harms to diversity because there will be misuse, or it will significantly devaluate the meaning of our culture. The response is, it won't happen because we think that a good investment won't undermine the value of the culture. Because the value is what makes the art interested, right? And when an investment is some kind of business, which they would like to make these kind of things last as long as possible. And at the moment they are trying to undermine or just erase the value completely, or even just a little bit of the culture itself, it means that they will indirectly harm that kind of investment itself. Secondly, they come and say that it is better to separate the folklore from modernization. First response is that it won't take large attention if we do not modernize this kind of folklores, because just like what we've bench already said, that this young generation feels like the culture itself is boring. There is no such kind of interest that they want to have if and they want to give if this kind of things is boring at the first place. Secondly, and if it's inappropriate, just like they say, in a way that wear short batik skirt, for example, we think that it is one of the consequences of modernization, even though it is a hard pill that we have to swallow, but at least we make our culture known. And it is unlikely that people who know their cultures belong to are likely to not voice their opinion as to how to treat their piece of cloth as something valuable, so that information or message will go across everyone. And that is how we indirectly make sure that people who wear our art, who wear our traditional clothes, for example, will treat those kind of piece of our culture right. And thirdly, they come and say that how modernization will likely to take long time to adapt. It is unlikely because it is not like we abandon the traditional approach of folklores. While panels, what we mean with significant invest is that we put more fun, we put more attention to modernize the folklores and not completely abandon the traditional approach. And lastly, their counter-proposal come and say that they will make traditional art to be more attractive in their own way. First response is that those kind of things already happen since the first place, and there are so many cultural festivals, for example, but there is still no big exposure. Why is that? Because every year the performance will only be the same. Every year people or tourists go to those kind of performance and they get the same performance, and that is likely that will make those kind of performance boring at the very first place. Secondly, the government proposal is to make the exposure is well known, but also will let the traditional way still exist, even the investment is not solely focused on the traditional way of exposure. So several extension is the first, how it will significantly improve the culture itself, and secondly, how it will help to get more investment for the artists, right? So first, why young people does not have much interest in folklores? Because modernization, for example, teenagers or people do not pay that much kind of attention. For example, they just pay more attention to Western films, drama, and etc. that have a little to no correlation to the culture of our country. So what is the comparative? While investing, we are going to attract more young people to want to know about our culture, but it is not limited to know, but also to have a better understanding of our culture. With no investment, the progress will be stagnant, right? The money that government already put in traditional way of approach will be stagnant because only little to no people are willing to learn about culture. Second comparative then, there will be no resource to support more cultural performance in modern way that likely to attract more people. For example, the concert of Weird Genius that put culture in their songs, for example, or Wonderful Indonesia that insert so many legends, so many folklores in their song movies or song videos, for example. That is something that we want to reach under our side of the house. If there is lack of investing, the art performance will be boring. Since people go there just to take pictures, no after effects such as curiosity that attract them to know more about art. Lastly, cultural festival will have bigger reach that will be easier to promote folklores to bigger number of people. For example, you put our legends to films, right? There will be so many people watching it in a very short time. They will know about our legends in, for example, 1 or 2 hours, and they still get the value of that films of our legend at the end of the day. And if there is no such investing, promotion will be not that big because it is not interesting. People of modern people do not like boring things, and they are not likely to be just left those kind of culture at the end of the day. And secondly, how it will help to get more investment. investment. Modern nation never stops such in festival, movies, dance, and etc. Right? But it reach almost everything. For example, fashion, food, songs, and so on and so far. The scenario is that with that investment in form of fun or promotion, for example, i.e., you wear batik and traditional clothes with proper investment. For example, the delegations wear our culture, wear batik to go abroad, for example. Or we have great movies. The tourists or big investor were likely to be interested because it is aesthetic, because it is unusual and unique. More foreigners interested in it means more our culture are being recognized, and they will eventually come to our country. It indirectly support our artists because it's not just big artists, it is the small medium enterprises that create those kind of culture with modern way that people are being more interested. They will buy those kind of things, and it indirectly support our society itself. So until this time, proud to propose.
Check. I think it's very opportune that I wore batik today, and the topic is arts and culture. Okay. With that being said, pronouns he, him. I'll take a POI. More likely from the opening half. Okay. With that being said, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Members of the House, the principal arguments that need to be proved in government's case is twofold, right? Whether modernization falls in line with the urgency of cultural preservation, and secondly, whether investing heavily will actually spur the preservation or just be a boondoggle like popcorn in the movie theaters, right? Notice that government's case centers on the trade-off of purity of culture, how in the face of extinction trade-offs are better, but what they fail to realize is that the actors within the debate hold those values at high priority, and there are indeed actors in the debate that are important for us to realize, right? Secondly, opening opposition puts their arguments were unable to be mechanized because the alternatives were not really discussed. Even though they say that they want to understand young people, they don't really analyze on why that's important and how will they do that. So firstly, on character analysis on this debate, right? Folklore must be preserved and acted upon. And for these cultures that are conservative in value or are in regions that are disparate geographically, they are acted upon on a day-to-day basis. Villages that still hold to these traditional dances for ceremonies and so on and so forth, right? So this directly clashes with the characterization coming from opening government when they say that these individuals within modern society don't have a direct recollection of what is actually considered as purity of culture. But the actual reality is that within these traditional societies, it is acted upon daily. Because they are the premier source of information for how to effectively modernize these types of media, they have the highest priority and should be prioritized within the creation of the media itself, right? So for these individuals, folklore are not just folklore, in the sense that it is fundamental basis for their everyday interactions. The mothers tell folklore to the child about Roro Jonggrang or Malin Kundang, right? They instill these societal values within the folklore itself and act upon it as every day. For these individuals, the purity of the culture itself is important due to their ties in the upholding of social structures itself, right? Secondly, they act as the bedrock for these societies and as something stable they can hold on to in an era of rampant globalization and an era of global change, right? And serve as a protection towards this globalization. That is something that it is not discussed within government's case, and something that is important if we are going to uphold these preservation of culture in the first place, right? Secondly, on the act of modernization itself, right? Through modernization, it leads towards the dissolvement of the sense of belonging existent in status quo. Accurate representation is not possible if individuals who from these cultures are not to be a part of the modernization process itself. When these actors view their folklores in a modernized way, 2 points of analysis. Best case scenario coming from opening government is that they're going to see that their culture is going to be represented and they are part of the decision-making process. However, it's not in the traditional form. When this happens, these individuals will be alienated from their own culture. this falls in line with the incentive of companies to produce a simplified view of the cultures of these traditional cultures, right? Because when we view like Gatot Kaca in Mobile Legend, it is not the Gatot Kaca in Folklore, it is the simplified version of Gatot Kaca. And therefore, when these actors in those traditional places view that the Gatot Kaca within popular media is not the same, they will feel a sense of alienation, as though that even though this is utilizing the name of Gatot Kaca, it's not really what I know as that particular thing, right? Secondly, a worst case scenario. When these individuals who have knowledge of the cultures aren't part of the development process, it will result in alienation and disenfranchisement, again, just worsening the effects. However, this will be more likely because look at the case example of Nickelodeon's Avatar and the movie Avatar, right? There was a severe gap in the casting process where Aang was supposed to be like Eastern Asian, but he got casted as white. So there's a tendency for these producers to have a narrow view of the casting process and how these stories are going to actually paint out, right? This was also reflected in the story points where they got wrong. Yep.
We already tell you that bringing folklore to a modern audience also gives the elders a platform to tell their story and represent their culture, meaning that benefit is inexclusive, but OG already proves that this culture can be brought everywhere to the modern audience. So net delta, we still win.
Thank you. On that note, I will explain that later within my arguments. But so moving on forward, as I said, like this is more likely to happen, that mischaracterization of cultures is more likely to happen when there's a trend in the creation of these folklores, because producers will be pushed more to create, and the incentive for them is to produce and not produce an accurate representation, but just to put out into the media as many forms of these traditional cultures that they can find, right? So secondly, even if such as the case of Weird Genius, where they are successful, these individuals who hear their music and are recognized globally, right? This won't really be recognized as a new form of traditional culture, but will be categorized as something new entirely. So it defeats the purpose of saying that it will be recognized as culture, because it's not culture, it's something new within that context. So it is mitigating the effects of representation in the first place coming from opening government, right? So what we actually want within this debate, right? We think that this is the case of government. This is the case that we need to preserve culture. It would not be in the modernization of culture itself, but through the doubling down of folklore itself, right? In the case of Bali, where traditional folklore was able to be transformed and liked by the modern people, even in their form of traditional culture itself. So the purity is simply kept there within our side of the house. We don't need to make a trade-off like in the opening government half, right? Something that feels distinctly traditional instead of something that resembling the tradition itself. But so if we take the example of Bali again, right, in Tari Kecak, it's becoming a global phenomenon. So when opening government says that it's not really something that is pertinent towards the global society, we can view just Tari Kecak as one of the examples where traditional values and the purity of culture is something that is interesting towards the eyes of the global population itself, right? So secondly, when we double down on culture, what we'll effectively get is a unique value that we can propose towards individuals who are not of our own culture. In the sense of preservation of culture, we can view them, hey, this is something new, this is something that is inherently tied towards our society, and that is becoming the unique selling point of this preservation, right? We will then spur from this, we will also can spur academic research and taking into accord to the proper representation towards the trait of that government wants. With that being said, we are proud to propose.
panels. For this generation, folklore that use or wear in traditional way is very boring. That's why the modernization should take the place in the very first place. Before I'm going to further explanation towards my position, I would like to parallelize the understanding of the concept, which is art and also culture. Art and culture basically something that comes from society, for society, and to society, which have to be perceived and passed through generation as the identity to distinguish one nation to another, and need to be promoted as well. There is no standard to assess that art is good or bad, or so on and so forth. And because art is abstract, so what we need to value is that what we need to respect, we respect the value, not how it looks in the very first place, ladies and gentlemen. Now I'm going to give, before that, I would like to say that I'm not going to give any rebuttal towards previous speaker, but rebuttal will be provided or including in my point of clash that later on will be delivered. First, the clarification to the context is that I would like to clarify what is modernization. Modernization basically is something it's to make something more acceptable in modern society, which is our society already living in the Western standard. And what the worst case that we'll face in the future is that the country that has been whitewashed will definitely forget or leaving their culture behind and choose to live in Western world culture or point of view. And then for clarification toward the folklore or cultural accessories, clothing, and etc., what we should know about it, folklore is represent the idea of identity, intellectual wealth, and also the access to the place where it belongs, since it has never been explained by opening government, and this is something that what I see as the gap that I need to fulfill in the very first place. Now I'm going to give the extension for our position. As we have already assumed that has already proved during the debate, what I would like to say that the opening opposition, also the closing opposition, tend to see that modernization as something that very negative. Okay, what I would like to describe for you what kind of concern that they were concerned about is that they concerned that modernization bring disadvantage to several reasons, such as threatening the authenticity of culture, and also bring the condition of questioning their culture or identity crisis, and also because they're concerned that we're living in the Western lifestyle, such as way of dressing up and so forth, and so on and so forth. And this is something that they're probably concerned. But what we are trying to bring you into different perspective, that we see hope in the modernization itself. What kind of hope that we see? First, modernization brings the hope to perceive our culture in the alternative way, which is the actor have to receiving the proper education, such as the proper advocation, such as education about the value of culture itself. So the cultural inappropriation that has never been taught or mentioned by every single person in this floor will be prevented and will not happen to disadvantage the culture in the term of value itself. And also, modernization is very useful and positive because of this reason. The first one, to help the culture to fit in modern society. For example, are you going to wear batik or kantanun in really like in old school style and go to the public? I don't believe that you will wear that in your daily life. And then, as the Gen Z, we want to promote our culture, such as kan batik and then kantanun, for example, the previous speaker wear kan batik in modern way, not in old school like wear kamban and so on. This is simply something that I want to point it out as a modernization of the culture itself, and that is very positive. So people, if you are going to somewhere, for example, to the United States of America and wearing that kind of style, they'll notice that you're from Indonesia, and that's something that brings a pride to us as an Indonesia because we own kan batik itself. And then it would also increase in the confidence of where it belongs, because as I've mentioned that the pride that we will have when our culture is widely known, and it brings us like a pride because besides that it's widely known and it easily to be accepted. For example, like those who wear kantanun and then go to New York Fashion Week with modern style of dressing up, will giving us like a pride, because they know our culture, they know our traditional fabric, and then they'll be proud because they know that this coming from Nusa Tenggara, for instance. And also, once again, something that we see as the hope is that it will also extend the existence of the culture, since I've mentioned it times and times, because this is very crucial of modernization in this modern era. And then I'm going to give for my point of class, firstly for the opening opposition. First, they concern about the incorporation for wearing kain batik, which is made in Western style. But our response is, we are going to wear kamban. Are we going to wear kamban or like a kain batik in Kraton way for this modern day? I don't. Unfortunately, this statement is narrow because. Unfortunately, I disagree with that, because their statement is not something that's very strong to describe what is fashion. Since fashion is a part of art, and there is no standard to assess that that art is good or that art is bad. And also, they miss to comprehend that asking the permission of ketua adat. Asking permission of ketua adat will apply to certain places and certain cultures, such as orang dalam tribe. But the folklore we are focused here is folklore that have already that can be accessed freely with immense of respect towards it. And also, they don't provide a better solution of how they will promote the folklore, since they refuse to modernize this culture. And for this reason, we refuse their case. And also for the closing opposition, they assume that the modernization of culture, especially the cultural figure, not necessarily promote the culture, but it is the simplification of the culture. But our response to that is that it is not exclusive at all, because what we serve in the tables is, since the very first place, that we provide a proper information before, during, and after the product is released or being promoted in the very first place. That's why there will never be something inappropriate towards the culture itself, and I'm proud to refuse their case. And for the conclusion, we as the closing government still believe that the modernization of folklore itself will help the culture to exist till the end of the world. God bless.
Okay, you can refer to me as he or him, and I'll start my speech. The goal of arts and entertainment, arts and culture, is mainly to entertain the people, and the whole government case are based on. They said that the traditional arts and culture is not interesting, or it is not accepted into the modern society, but we have said before that the dances of kecak, tari kecak, it is popular between the tourists that goes to Bali, and therefore their case of uninteresting and it is not likely to be accepted to the society fails. Therefore, the whole government side should not bring this case up, because it is not likely to be happen. Because as I know, the folklore or the folk tales have a certain charm to it that doesn't need to be decorated by such attempt of modernization to make it acceptable. For example, music that uses unique instruments that creates unique experiences, such as gamelan or suling performance, that it is to be preserved within our society, and it is not likely to be forgotten. Therefore, their case of not interesting is not likely. And instead of fabricating such new products of entertainment, such as EDM, X, culture, gamelan, etc., it is not a good attempt to preserve culture. Why? The charm of it, the value of it, it becomes stained to the modern value of such as sexualist or sexualization, or such modern values that are not good for the culture preservation itself. Therefore, the idea of modernizing local arts is not ideal for the arts to be preserved and to be experienced by the audience. Our solution here is simple, that we need to teach more people or funding more people through arts education. Why? The arts education here is important to introduce people to a real form of art instead of such mixture between modern arts or even the different part of it. Sorry, no thank you. Therefore, modernizing things and art such as music and movies, it is not quite, it is quite good, but it is dangerous for the culture preservation because it is not represented fully. And the second point is, they said that by doing the modernizing, this kind of art will gain attention. This is also not true because our goal here is to entertain the audience, and I think and we think that the charm that I have been said before of the arts and cultures is enough to entertain the audience rather than modernizing it even further. Because by modernizing it, it is dangerous for the culture preservation because it is influenced heavily by the, sorry, no thank you. It is influenced heavily by the modern world such as Western culture. Therefore, I said the sexualization of such parts of the arts will be likely happen in the modernizing the arts. Okay, so rather we are creating a solution rather than modernizing. It is likely to be, for example, we heard that epic folklore tales such as Malin Kundang or even Tangkuban Perahu, it requires such epic picturization of it rather than the modernizing of the value. So the value itself is keep inside the story.
Point, OG?
Yeah.
I think we already tell you how there is an active incentive to properly create accurate representation, both from the state and from the general society that want accurate cultural representation. Your case has already been preempted, none of it flies.
Okay, so the study of arts is important to accurately represent, right? Therefore, our solution of funding art schools is one of the best solutions we have to actually represent it accurately, okay? And therefore, our point here is to uphold the social values of the folklore tales and entertainment, and to represent the culture instead of changing it into a mixture of modern world. And to not only resembles the part of the culture, but actually representing it and to introducing it into the whole new audience. For example, for the tourist that comes into the Indonesia villages, traditional villages that has some dances, unique dances, or some kind of culture preservation clothing, for example, they must be preserved and to introduce more by the government instead of modernizing it or even changing it into some kind of new form of entertainment. Therefore, if any of you want to POI, okay. Therefore, we are proud to oppose. Thank you.
I'll